So, welcome everyone to today's GBTA Georgia chapter meeting and the second in our series of um, uh, meetings for Education Month. I want to first thank our Education Month sponsor, BCD Travel, for being an amazing partner and for each year hosting Education Month for us. So we're very thankful for that partnership. We're happy to have with us today Marie Chevalier. Will be presenting on how to find your dream career. And this is going to be an interactive session. So I'm really excited to hear what Maria has to say for us today. Not a whole lot in the way of chapter updates. I want this to be all about the education. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim Kearns for the speaker introduction and then on to Maria. So Kim, on to you.
Great, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As Dwight said, this is our second in the Education Month series. And today is more about self-development and how you find your dream career. And there's no one that I know that's better to lead this than Maria. So before I talk about Maria's accolades, I would like to say that we're going to mix this one up a little bit. And we want you to know that you have the ability to unmute yourself during the presentation and jump in with any burning questions or comments that you have for Maria. We want to make this as interactive and engaging as possible. And of course, if you prefer not to ask directly, you can put your question in the chat and I'll be happy to field the question for you. So with that, many of you already know Maria, and those of you that don't, she has over 30 years of experience in the travel industry within all different areas of the travel ecosystem, from Hilton, Travelport, BCD Travel, Travel Desk, and now with PredictX. And most recently, you would have heard Maria's name when she was elected to one of the board seats on the board of GBTA on a global level. She has a wealth of experience as a business travel buyer, served as Global Director of Travel and Meeting Services for Johnson & Johnson and HP, both programs with an annual T&E spend of over $1 billion. And as she was also nominated or awarded the 2010 Business Travel Manager of the Year from BTN. She's always been ahead of her time in her adoption of data and analytics tools to improve travel programs, customer experience, and to help everyone improve their own lives through career advancement. After reading all of that and talking about what she does on a professional level from the business or the corporate side, in her spare time, she leads CTME Search Party. It's a group of corporate travel meetings and events professionals that work to support travel industry peers in their pursuit of career growth. And this was started way before the COVID era, but boy, she's helped a lot of people during the pandemic look into how you identify what your transferable skills are. And she's helped people just kind of sort out what they want to do when they grow up. So with all of that being said, I am going to turn it over to Maria and let her take center stage. So thank you again, Maria, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I'm so honored to be part of this agenda and such a great group. I've always loved coming to participate and present to the Georgia chapter. It is my favorite. I tell it all the time. I think it has some of the best members, literally around the world on there. I know I'm biased because I live here, but I still think that's the case. So as Kim mentioned, this is meant to be interactive, and everything I talk about in the context can be used whether you want to grow within the company or if you want to kind of go in a different direction. So it all applies no matter which one you're looking at, okay? So there's kind of the agenda, but I always say these meetings are your meetings. So if you guys want to take it in another direction and disrupt it, do it. Because I want to make sure you're getting out what you need to help you with your career. So disrupt, all right? So with that said, I always say the perfect job is where passion intersects with talent. So when you first kind of start the journey, you want to make a list of what do you love? What makes your heart just go pitter patter? Like, to me, outside of helping people reach their greatest potential in life, I also have a really passion around supplier diversity. I have a passion around data. Those are all passions for me. They're at the core of who I am. So the other side, then you make a list of, is what am I good at? So the one thing I'm really passionate about is music, but I'm not talented there at all. I cannot sing. In birthday situations, I'll be honest with you, I'm lip syncing it. Nothing's really coming out. So it doesn't have anything on the talent side. So you make that list of talent, and then what you try to do is put those together. Where do the two intersect? Because that's where you're going to find your greatest success in life, is when you love what you're doing and you're good at it. Okay. Now, don't think just to be good at it doesn't mean that you're not going to develop in it. You're always going to develop over time. So don't fear that. And I have always said, I know that I've made a great decision on a career move when I'm absolutely terrified at my soul I'm going to fail. Because that means I'm growing. That means I'm challenging myself. I tell people the story that my first day at HP, I remember I was taking this 4.5-hour flight from Atlanta to California for my first day. And during the flight, I had convinced myself I absolutely could not do this job. There is no way I could go lead HP. There's no way. I come from a very simple background. We were the first generation to even get a college degree. What could a little old person like me with a sergeant major dad could possibly do at an HP, on there? And I land, and to add insult to injury, Delta loses my luggage. And I'm convinced it's a sign that I'm not supposed to be there because I can't do the job. And I call my sister, who's a psychologist, and I said, I can't do it. I've already looked at the return flights. I'm just going to call them and tell them I can't do the job. And out of it, like at a scene of a movie, she goes, snap out of it. Yes, you can. Cut it out. You can do the job. Stop panicking. So that's normal. You want to panic. You want to have that feeling of, I can't do this job. I can't do it, because that means you're growing. It means you're stretching. That's what you want to do with every new opportunity, is have that feeling of, oh crap, what are the return flights, on there? That's normal. The other thing is, I always love this. If you could start all over in your life, and you had a magic wand, what would you change? What would you tell your younger self as you're starting out with, on there? Like, I would say, as a kid, what did you tell yourself? I used to always tell myself that I wanted to be a teacher, and so as you go through life and you start thinking about the next chapter, think back to your childhood and say, what was it? What is it that I loved? Where, on there. So think through that. And I do love this quote. It says, nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. So I don't want you to think it's impossible. Now, Kim mentioned this, which is very important, is the issue of transferable skills. So this became more important in the pandemic than any other time, I think, in our history, is your transferable skills. So often people think, I only have one career path. I can only do this thing, and that's it. And I want to challenge you that very much that's not the case. So what happened in the pandemic, it forced people to get out of their comfort zone and start thinking differently about their career path. Where do I want to go? Because during certain phases, and still now, as we're in the recovery phase of this industry, it is not the numbers that we need. It's not the strong numbers in our industry, the jobs. So we need to think differently. Okay. We need to stop and say, okay, what's in those other buckets that I want to do, that I can do? So if you think about it, good negotiating skills go to any industry. It's not limited to the travel industry at all. It's so transferable. A great salesperson can sell anything. A great project manager can manage any project. It's all of these things. You have to think about, what are all the things that I'm proficient at, and look at the different jobs that need those skills. you have the skills necessary to do the job. And I don't want you to limit yourself to say, this is the only thing I've ever done. This is exactly it. This is the career path that I need to go. And so I want you to think in many different directions in different things. Now, we've seen it in our industry where people go from being a buyer to a supplier or supplier to a buyer. And we're all like, oh, well, that's okay. But then we won't think about going outside the travel industry to professional services, to consulting industries, to all these other industries. It's no different. The same principles apply. It's called transferable skills. What makes you good as a buyer in those same skills as will make you good as a supplier, which will make you good in other industries. So don't fear that, but I want you to start by thinking about those transferable skills and what are the other ways that I can apply that. All right. So the first thing I tell people to do is after you've kind of made that list of the passion and the talent, and I want you to think now out of transferable, is you should always think between 3 and 5 different career search strategies. Okay. So what does that mean? So the first thing it talks about is what are the roles that you want to do? So let's take me as an example. Okay. Is when I'm doing a career search, my 3 ones typically are as follows. I am good at global account management or customer success, point 1. 2 is, leading any sort of data management organization. Okay, 2. 1 is being a travel manager. That's 3. Okay. 4 is, again, going back to my passion, driving a supplier diversity organization. Okay. So different buckets. All right. And the reason why is it is going to be a combination of fate and effort. Okay. So I would say just because I need a job doesn't mean the seas are going to part and the job's automatically going to be there just because I have a need. And that's why you want multiple career search strategies, because there may not be an opening just because you have a desire or need at that particular junction in your life. So you want to open the doors. Now, the same thing applies if you're thinking internally. Okay. So if you're thinking about within your own company, you should think in those same numbers. Where are the 3 to 5 areas that I want to pursue? Don't just one. I think we're all taught, in school and watching our parents is all we're supposed to do is go up. That's the only direction. And that shows success. Well, it doesn't. First of all, when you think about these opportunities, individual contributor roles can actually be some of the more successful roles, the more successful opportunities. Managing people isn't everything out there. I think sometimes we get stuck with that we have to go upward to be successful. And that's not true. As an individual contributor, when I was doing sales, I made more than the CEO 3 years running, and I was an individual contributor. Okay. So you have to think about what in the context of these 3, again, in paths and, where do you want to go? The other thing that you have to think about in the context are what professions are growing, on there. And think about, there are new professions being, created all the time. Matter of fact, my favorite companies are one that don't even use the traditional titles at all. So you have to be careful when you're doing your searches too, because so often people will put a traditional title in their searches and they miss things because they're thinking traditionally, and some companies are simply not traditional. Okay. So you have to adjust on that one. But in the roles itself, I want to challenge you because it's very important to start off to say, what do I want to do? Okay. What are those 3 to 5 things that I want to look into for my career? And then we'll talk about putting the strategy to find those opportunities. But it's very important for you to start off by saying what do you want to do? Now, a lot of times people will get really worried and they'll go out and say, I'm good. I want to do anything, whatever comes across. That's not true. You don't, I'll be honest. Nobody's going to hire me to be a stripper. They're not going to do it. They're going to say, are you kidding me? We wouldn't even hire you to do that in your 20s. So you wouldn't do anything. So you have to say, and you are not desperate. So you don't want to come across desperate either. People are afraid to put a stake in the ground. They're fearful because they're not going to find it. And that's why you use 3 to 5, but you need to not be too vague, because if you're too vague, people can't help you. They're not going to know, they're not going to associate, oh, that's a perfect role for Kim. It's going to be too vague. You have to give them what you're looking for so they can help you. And like I said, I use the example of, I'm looking in these 3 areas, and this is what I'm looking for. So they'll always think of you when it comes to that opportunity when they hear about it. All right. Any questions about the role? Okay. All right. So now it's the who. The who is very, very important. Who do you want to work for? And I can't tell you how often I challenge somebody, so who do you want to work for? They say, I don't care. I go, you do care. You really do care. So you want to think about what industries, again, do you believe in that you on there? What industries are thriving and which ones are there? But there's nothing wrong with saying, look, at the end of the day, I'm a fixer. I go into companies that are in distress. That's my gig. And so you got to think about, who are you? Are you the person that runs into a building on fire or runs out of a building on fire? Who are you? Okay. And then who is that company regarding that? Do you thrive in chaos, or do you need lots of structure? Okay. Do you like being a generalist, or do you like being a specialist? Okay. What is it? What sort of culture do you thrive in? What are all those things? Because it does matter. Okay. So in the company size, do you like the giants, or do you like the entrepreneur? Are you a disruptor, or are you a chug, I'm just maintaining business? Okay. On there, do you thrive in a public company or a private company? Do you like the startups? On there, do you like somebody who's local or global? High growth or steady Freddy, or distressed? So you've got to think about all those, because all those matter about your day-to-day. Every one of those will matter what your work life is like. Okay. And I say that because, as you guys know, I've gotten around, I've worked at a lot of companies, and sometimes we go to a company for our pedigree. Okay. They're going to give us credibility. So now that I've worked for all these companies with all these initials, my resume hits the top because I have a pedigree. Okay. Now that gets me in the door. I have to still close the door. Okay. But it gets me indoors easier because I now have a pedigree. All right. And especially as you're thinking about going outside the industry, if you haven't worked for a big branded name that's well recognized, or a branded name, it's harder to make it past all the screening processes. Okay. But it can be done. So you've got to think about, in your chess moves of your career, where do I need to go to get to where I want to be? So sometimes you have to take a couple steps to get there, on there. And I tell everybody, look, the roles at these large global companies at J&J and HP, they're tough jobs. They're very tough jobs. HP was a company that was made up of hundreds of mergers and acquisitions. You go into a company meeting, they say, yeah, I'm former Compaq, I'm former EDS, I'm former this. I was like, I'm just HP, dysfunctional, because the way that they made their numbers is they were constantly restructuring and reorganizing and right sizing. Every 6 months, I was downsizing my organization. You've got to have some tough skin to live through that. It's not easy, on there. So you say, can I handle a company that is constantly restructuring and reorganizing? And the demands are tough. They're tough on there. So you really want to think through, who do you want to work for? Okay. And then you're going to make a hit list of those companies, and you're going to stay laser focused to get in the doors to the hiring manager of those roles that we talked about within the context of the company. Okay. And let's face it, in this day and age, it's very easy to do research on a company on there. I love Hoovers, not the vacuum cleaner, because I'm a Roomba girl, but, Hoovers with an S. if you go to Hoover, you're going to find out about vacuum cleaners, and the ones with the S, you find out about companies. So in the one with the Hoovers, everything, whoever writes for them is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I remember at J&J, I could never figure out how to tell people what we did, because they had 3 different divisions: medical devices, pharmaceutical, and no, I can't remember. Oh yeah, pharmaceutical and devices. They said, they had a great line. They said, "You can't get healthy without J&J." Now I said, that's brilliant. No, I get it. Okay. So one is they have, their writers are brilliant about kind of helping you understand who the business is. And they give a snapshot that tells you everything about the company. So the first thing you want to do in researching it, going back to who do you want to work for, look at the number of employees. Are they growing year after year? Or in the past, 5 years, has the headcount gone down? Because that means you're going to be living in a world of headcount reduction. Okay, that's their culture. Or is it going up? Are their revenues going up? Is their profits going up? Unless again you thrive in that world, then look for those. And then you want to look to see in that revenue side, is the revenue just like an HP chug, good chug, good chug, good chug, good chug, or is it whoo Amazon? And which do you work in? Because again, if you're working in a company that's changing quickly, they typically don't have a lot of structure yet. So you have to be able to work in gray. And do you want to work in gray? Can you work in gray? So this is where you start with making that very important list of who do I want to work for? What's that target list of companies that will help me get to where I want? So any questions so far before I go to the next slide?
Hi, Maria, this is Dina. I just want to add, I couldn't agree more with you in regards to the company hit list. Last year, I was looking for a job for about 4 months, and this number one is first to find out what you're looking for. The second was create the hit list. And then from there on, target them, connect with people, connect with managers, use your LinkedIn to get to those people. That got me a job 4 months later. From one person to another, starting on a higher level, dig deeper, make connections, ask for recommendations, send your resume, and eventually it will get to the hiring manager. I had an interview after twice my application was rejected by the ATS system and the HR. It just simply didn't go through. And then still hiring manager got my name from the upper management in the company whom I connected with on the LinkedIn, and I got an interview and got hired. So,
it's funny. I tell a very similar story. Kim will laugh at this one, but I applied for a role at BCD Travel and I got the Dear Jane letter, how I was not qualified. Well, I didn't stop at the no, and I networked my way into the hiring manager, and the rest is history. And that's when Kim and I met. And had I taken that first rejection and not gone and networked my way in, I would have never met Kim. And so, yeah, I tell people and we'll talk more about this. You're a great lead into some more about what we're going to talk about, but thank you. Anybody else before we head on? Okay. I think like with anything, you have to start with a goal. So whether you're displaced and you're looking for the job, or you're looking for a job, a new path internally or externally, the same thing applies. You have to create a plan and then put it into manageable tasks. Okay. And if you're currently employed and you're just looking, to grow, I always say, put something on your calendar, one thing a week that you do to progress in your career. And you need to put it on your calendar, because we know this from exercise. If you don't have it on your calendar, it doesn't happen. Okay, maybe it just doesn't with me, and all you guys are much better than me on that one. But so it's very important to do that. Now, if you're displaced and so you're looking and you don't have a full-time job, then you have to up that. And it's still about goals. So I would say you have to have so many network meetings a week. Okay. So many of all these different things that you do in the circle of your career search strategy, but there has to be specific goals. You've got to be honestly accountable to that, but it starts with a goal, and that's what making sure everything gets done on there. And you have to work the plan. So those are very, very important. The other thing I want to bring up is, and this happens so often, I can't tell you, that women will not apply for a job unless they are 100% qualified. Study after study after study shows a man will read a job description and says, I can do 60%. They're stupid if they don't hire me. Okay. A woman will say, you know what? I can't do 100%. I can only do 95. I'm not going to apply. So it's the one and only time I'm going to say, act like a man. Okay. Act like a man. There was a woman in our career search group about 5 years ago, and she was textbook to this. And her name was Patty, and she was part of the group, and this opportunity came up, and I sent it to her. I said, this would be perfect for you. And she goes, Maria, I'm not going to apply for it. I can't do 20% of that. They're never going to hire me. I can't do that 20%. And I told her to shut up and apply. And I said, I'm not kidding. I said, stop acting like a woman here. Apply for the freaking job. So long story short, go the whole thing. She gets the job, you know, and then a year later, and I hadn't physically met her yet, but a year later, I ran into her at a GBTA convention, and she came up to me and introduced herself. And she said, you know, that 20% that I said I couldn't do and I wasn't going to, you know, even apply. She goes, I've mastered it. It's nothing. I made such a big deal about it, and it's nothing on there. So I don't want you, when you read a job description, say, I can't do that. I can't, you know, at all. I want you to say, look, as long as it's in the 70%, you go for it. Go for it, go for it, go for it. You will learn the next part. Like I said to you in the beginning, you know, every job I've ever had, I'm absolutely terrified I would fail at it, because if you look at the job description, I couldn't do everything there. So I was convinced myself I couldn't do it. Do not do that. Go for it. Jump. What do you have to lose? Nothing. Nothing at all. So it's very, very, very important that you don't do this. Okay. So let's take a moment to talk about your marketing material. Now, if all of this is sounding a little bit like sales, it's because it is. Everything in your career search is just like a sales. You know what? Salespeople do what? They try to identify who their target audience is. You know, they do all these same things. They put their marketing material, they do all this is just like a sales. Okay. So your marketing material is your resume and your LinkedIn page. Okay. So first of all, I want you to say, this is one of the times you need to be schizophrenic. Okay. You should have 20 different versions of your resume. Because why? Because all these jobs are different. They are, and they should be targeted to the job that you're going after. Okay. You remember I told you 3 to 5 different career search strategies. Right there, you have 3 to 5 resumes. And then we put together a resume to highlight snapshot of our career, but we can't encapsulate everything we need to in a 2-page document. So we've got part of it back there in our bag of tricks, you know, to bring up during interviews, etc. But when you see a job description, you need to stop and make sure it matches word for word, skill to skill, experience to experience. Okay. Because again, we don't put it all there because the bag of tricks are, you know, that we can't put everything we've done in our tenure on 2 pages. So bring it back to the forefront because it's required in there, and highlight it. So let's say, for example, I'm going for a job and the number 1 skill they have is negotiation. It's not 4, it's not number 5, it's number 1. Okay. So when it's number 1, what I will do then is I will make sure that throughout my resume, I highlight something I've done in negotiation. Okay. Where before I didn't emphasize it as much. Now it's emphasized because they've prioritized it. They've emphasized it. So I'm going to go in there and talk about how I went up against American Express card and, you know, won. You know, I'm going to bring up those examples where I didn't before. Okay. So you need to customize it. Okay. To each search, to each application. Also take away your industry jargon. Okay. You need to make it as generic as possible because the systems out there that are screening do not understand our jargon and on there. So keep it neutral. It's also very important if you're looking to transfer industries. They don't know our jargon. So the thing I always say to do is let a friend, not from the industry, your partner, your sibling, read your resume and see if they understand all of it. They'll find your jargon and say, I don't even know what's ADR. Marie, what is that? Stop. I don't even know what that means. Siblings love to criticize you. So send it there first. They'll get joy out of it. If you guys don't have a sibling, I have 7, and I'll lend you one. And trust me, they'll help go through your resume. So the other thing is you need to have a version for your online applications. And so certain industries and professions, you got to get your sexy on in your resume. Okay. If you're marketing, your resume should not look the same as if you're finance. In finance, it should be about as boring as can be, the format. As a matter of fact, halfway through it, you should fall asleep. It should be like an Ambien. Okay. You guys think I'm joking. And if you're marketing and you're going into a sexy advertising agency, oh no, you got to get your sexy on throughout that whole resume. It's got to demonstrate your edginess. It's got to show who you are on there. And trust me, the finance degrees are kind of like the travel manager ones. They're boring as hell. So you've got to adjust based on kind of the industries you're targeting. So if you're going to target with Google, you better get your Google on. On there, is really adjust that resume, adjust. The other thing is you need to focus on your accomplishments. So often resumes are job descriptions. They just cut and paste the job description. This is what I was supposed to do. This is what my job said I was supposed to do. No, people hire you because of your accomplishments. There was this problem, this goal. I did this. It resulted in that. Okay. And I call them goosebump moments. When I get a resume, if it doesn't give me goosebumps, they're out. They're gone. And so often, you guys, like at HP and J&J and Hilton, we get thousands of resumes, thousands. Okay. You have to be able to differentiate yourself throughout that process. So it's through your accomplishments. What do you do? How did you solve a problem? How did you meet and exceed goals? How did you do this? That's what they're looking for, is the accomplishments. The job description should be a couple sentences. The accomplishments should have half of your resume. Half of your resume should be about what you did that was exceptional, what you did to overcome every barrier, every challenge, everything that you did. Okay. So the other trick I'm going to teach you guys is, look, I'm a numbers person. I'm not a writer. So I've learned the art of plagiarism. Okay. So what I do is I will search throughout the internet for jobs posted based on what I'm looking for. Okay. And I'll read them because typically they're written by these big companies and they're professional writers, incredible jobs. And then I look for it and I'll take out a sentence or a word or a thought. And I take that and I put them in a document and then I start bringing it into my resume. I like that one. That was a great way to say my accomplishment if you wanted to be articulate and sound good, because the way I worded it sure wasn't that. So you want to look through others. The other thing I do is go look on LinkedIn for people who do what you want to do or are doing and see how they worded it. How did they word that? Okay. So it's important to go and read those to get ideas, of ways to word it, way to, get that idea of how to phrase things on there. And certainly you guys Google formats. There's some really cool formats out there, but when you're submitting it through an online application, you have to have the boring version of it. It can't read it on there. And I can certainly send you guys links to, formatting for an online application process. But again, many, many versions of your resume. So any questions on the resume before I talk about LinkedIn? Okay. All right. So another part of your marketing collateral is your LinkedIn page. Now, I am addicted. I was an early adopter of LinkedIn the minute it came in. And I love it. It has been one of the keys to my success of my career, both in helping me whenever I've been challenged, to connecting to people, to you name it. I think it's an amazing, amazing tool. Wish I would have thought of it. So the same thing go here is, it is a great source, not just to making sure that your resume is there, but LinkedIn is also a great source for finding job opportunities. And to the point earlier, to connect and do research about the company, that person, that organization. It's there. I stalk people like crazy on it. So I kid you not. And to be fearless. So there was an opportunity that came up, and it was very, very interesting, and in my history. And I literally sent a blind email because I found no connections, not second degree, first degree, anything for this opportunity. So I sent the chief procurement officer a note. I just went ahead and sent one. So what the heck, it'll be my dating life. I won't hear back. That's fine. But, you got to at least try. And guess what happened? He responded. So on there. So that's the good news. People will, respond sometimes, but it's good to do the research. Is what does that report to? Because on there, the majority of jobs, and we'll talk more about this, are found through networking. 80% of jobs are found through network. They're never posted. Okay. So in the context of that, you need to make sure that you are using LinkedIn. And if you don't know how to use LinkedIn, I can come back, or there's other LinkedIn experts you guys can have and teach you how to use it. It can help you with everything. Everything that you need to know there is on LinkedIn to help you do research on that person in preparation for the interview, about that organization, about that company. Everything that you need to know, and that chain of command even is there. Okay. Now, there are so many other resources out there. It's interesting now that the younger generation is really getting their arms around TikTok and all this stuff. So on there. So certainly I encourage, if you're younger or if you're recruiting somebody who's younger, to think about different things. There's also professional resume writing services that are out there. Now, there are a lot that are free, but if you feel like you need to do that, get a referral on that one. Just don't do it blindly. Out there, it can run, $300 to $1,000 for, the review of your resume, for, and they even help you with a blank version for applying online. So do that. And the same thing is your LinkedIn profiles and job postings. There's a lot of different, I'm a fan of Indeed, and I'm a fan of LinkedIn, and you can build your saved searches. And so, and that will send you a notification when an opportunity comes open for those companies, for that job title, for all those things, and it sends you a notification. And then you start applying, but that's for the posted jobs. When 80% of jobs never make a posting, you've got to be networking to find your way into the hiring manager for the jobs that don't make a posting. So anything before I go on to the next page? Okay, so your search. The commercial, the famous 30-second commercial. I push this hard, and it is critical, because this hidden job market, the only way they're going to be able to help you, your network, is to understand what you're looking for, who you are, and who do you want to work for. Okay. So a 30-second commercial is simply that. Look, I'm a 30-year travel industry veteran with complete end-to-end expertise. I'm in the midst of a confidential career search, and I'm looking to work for an entrepreneurial company driving their global success organization, or whatever the case may be. 30 seconds. Who are you? In 2 sentences. Who are you? Who are you? Okay. What do you want to do? And who do you want to do that with? Okay. 30 seconds. All right. So, but it's so important. And not only is it important to, when you're networking and to find the hidden job market, but it's also very, very important. In an interview, one of the first questions typically asked is, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. So it's your first impression. You don't want to ramble. And I'll even start mine, with them and say, give me your 30-second commercial. Tell me in 30 seconds about you. And the interesting thing is I won't stop the person, but it's the first test in their listening skills. I've had people go on for 15 minutes. Literally. And I said 30 seconds twice. And they go on 15 minutes. And one woman, and I can't make this stuff up, sometimes I think I'm being punked. She told me about her husband that she walked in that was having an affair with his secretary, and she caught them in a conference room table. And I went, I didn't know what to do with that. And I literally looked around the conference room to see if there were cameras. I'm like, is somebody punking me? Like, she went into this whole explanation. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so networking. The majority of your time, I tell people, spend your time where there's the success rate. Okay, so the greatest success is not staring at your computer looking for jobs. It's not. It is not. It's found through networking. So 80% of your time is networking, talking to people out there, because it's a hidden job market. Told you, 75 to 80% will never be posted. Half of the jobs I found were never posted, ever. So at all. Matter of fact, I recently there was a gentleman that I worked with years and years ago who started a career search, and I happened to know about 2 job openings because they reached out to me, introduced them. Neither one were posted. He got a job offer from both. Okay, hidden job market, your network, because the network is also, managers know not just the jobs they have today that are open, but they know what's coming down the budget approval system, who they think are going to be resigning, or who they think is going to, not make it through a PIP, all those. They know that. They know not just today, but they know the future opportunities on there. But the goal here is to get to the hiring manager. Okay. And this is like the Kevin Bacon game. Degrees away is, you've got to look in LinkedIn and say, okay, am I 1 degree, 2 degrees, or 3 degrees from this person, on there. So it's important that you are laser focused on, how do I get to that hiring manager? And like I said, sometimes you'll be connected, life is a little easier. And sometimes you just have to contact that person blind and say, what it is. And I tell you, I spend a day writing that note, going back and forth, making sure I'm hitting things after doing research on that person and on that company and anything on that organization. I will quote it, I will apply it, I will do my research on that one. But the goal is to get into that target list of companies that we talked about earlier on. You need to be focused on getting your way into that. And part of what your network does is, in the meeting that you have in the networking thing, you should go into that networking meeting with a goal of meeting 3 new people. You don't leave talking to anybody in your network until they've introduced you to at least 3 new people on that target list. And you've got to send them that target list in advance. You do your research on LinkedIn to see who they're connected to. But the reality is, we don't have all of our connections in LinkedIn. Like, for example, my neighbor works for P&G. If somebody says P&G, I've never hooked up with him on LinkedIn, but I know that he's an executive over P&G. So okay, hey, I can help you with that list. So it's things like that. Again, how can they help you get into your target list of companies? You need to have an agenda going into the networking meetings. So often what people do is they go and have the meeting when somebody said, yeah, you probably know I'm doing a career search. I've been displaced, or I'm doing this. So my background. So if you hear of anything, you let me know. That's what typically happens. It's not productive, it's not effective, and it won't drive results. You got to go in there with an agenda. Okay. The first thing is, look, I'm in the midst of a career search. Okay. I'm looking at the following areas. Boom, boom, and boom. I've done my research on my target list of companies and see that you are connected to 3 in my target companies. But I sent you the list too, because you may not be connected to all of those in there. So my ask is for you to introduce me to those 3 companies. Okay. And we'll talk about that. And At the end of that networking call that you have with that person is you should send them an email outlining what they agreed to. Because everybody has the best of intention, but let's face it, we're all overworked and overstressed. So it's yours to remind them what they agreed to. Okay. You agreed to introduce me to X, Y, and Z. And also you agreed to, look at my resume, give them any, comments on that. Along with, you're going to ask them for advice on your career search strategy, and introductions into people that will help you in this journey. And do not hesitate to ask them what's going on in their own company. Okay. Any questions on that?
Maria,
Yes.
would you give a little bit more insight into how you go about setting up those networking calls?
It's a great question, Kim. Okay, so the first that I always start with personally are the people that I'm close to, because it's a safe space. So I can kind of start getting my groove going with the close people, So they're more forgiving and understanding if you kind of flub up a little. So I will start with the people I'm closest to, okay? And literally what you need to do is send them an email or text or LinkedIn message and say, hey, I'm in the midst of a career search. Want to know if you have 30 minutes over the next week to meet with me. It needs to be a formal, scheduled meeting, okay? Because you want their time, their focus on you. And that's, you've got to have a degree of formality there. Send a meeting invite with the meeting logistics, okay? And when people are super busy, I do things like, hey, can we have a virtual cup of tea? Before your day starts, 7:30, you name the time, I'll be there, on there. Somebody argued with me when I said once that you should do a glass of wine. They said, no, I would, on there. So you start there. And after that first once you get your groove going and how to say this, how to run this meeting, then I start going more strategic, who are people that are connected to where I need to be. And same thing, reach out again, however you need to, LinkedIn, email, text message, asking for the 30-minute meeting, and then sitting down and having that meeting with them. It needs to be friendly, but formal. Focus on what you need to achieve. Yeah, great question, Kim.
Okay. Thank you. Great information. That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so job postings, I talked a little bit about this, is you need to go out there and create these postings because it's going to share with you the visible jobs, the jobs in the marketplace. But keep in mind, this is a funnel, okay? And it has these jobs, and everybody who's looking is going to be applying for those. When you go to the hidden job market, this many people, your competition is this versus this, okay? So when it's the visible opportunity, so let's take when the Google Travel Manager was out there, who do you think didn't apply for the Google Travel Manager? Okay, they had 1,000 applicants, Oracle, 1,000 applicants. Okay, they have to shut it down over a period of time because there's so many applicants. So what happens in these big companies is you're going to apply and it's going into this data system that's going to do that matching. And what that system is there to do is to weed you out, not in, out, because they've got to take this many and get it down to this many. Okay. So when you're applying, you have to, again, match those words up, match the things up if you want that system to do it. Now, what I do is apply online and then I start networking to the hiring manager. Okay. Just like you heard me say at BCD, I applied and then I networked. I got the Dear Jane and I said, Dear you, forget you. So apply. So the next phase that we're going to go into is, and it talks about the interview, is recruiters. Okay. Recruiters are there again to weed you out, not weed you in. So they've got this list and their job is to get it to this list. Okay. So the hiring manager is going to say, give me 10 applicants. So we're starting with 1,000. The system got it down to 50 and the recruiters there to get it down to 10. Okay. So recruiters, and I always say this, they're very nice people, which means I usually don't get along with them at all. Like they're the, hi, how are you? They're expressive, amiable, and they're super, super nice and cheerful. And they have posters of optimism everywhere around and colorful things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a numbers person. So you got to know, who you're interviewing with. Okay. And the hardest thing is when you have the polar opposite of your personality. I'm a driver analytical. And when I'm up against expressive amiables, it is like Stairmaster. It's like exercise time. It moves slow. Like they get on my everlasting nerve. So, but I have to be cheerful, match the tone and pace of this recruiter. And all of my examples aren't how I cut money out of the budget because they don't care. I talk about how I made the employee populations experience travelers so much happier, much nicer. I talk all of the warm, fuzzy things that I did. Okay, so that's a recruiter. So you've got to target your interview accordingly. And so their job is to weed you out, and yours is to make sure you don't get weeded out. You've got to, I don't care, put a smiley face behind that computer. You get your chirpy on, you have lots of caffeine, whatever it takes to, now, if you're expressive, amiable, this is going to be the easiest interview for you. But for us, driver analyticals, it's just torture. So you want to make sure that you're adjusting based on who it is. But that recruiter's job is to weed you out. Now, one of the questions the last question I ask when I'm in an interview is, do you have any questions or concerns regarding my ability to be successful in this role? So what I'm trying to find out is, are they going to weed me out? And, or did I not address a question correctly? So let's take both sides of this. The first thing is they say, yeah, I'm just concerned because I don't think you have enough negotiations experience. I'd say, well, could we revisit that? Because I actually think that's one of my core competencies. And I'd like to revisit that skill if you're okay with that. And let me give you a couple examples where I've demonstrated my ability to be extremely successful with negotiation. Okay. So it's overcoming an objection. All right. Now you flip that and they say, you know what, Maria, we really need somebody who knows how to sing. Oh, here we go again. Singing thing is going to be the death of me. Always it has been. All right, here we go. So in the singing thing is where I would say the scales. I go back to, you know what? I can't sing, and it's in all of your interests that I don't sing. However, everything else in this job, I do exceptionally well. And I will surround myself with great singers to make sure that that's never lost. But I'm never going to learn how to sing. This is not going to happen. There's nothing we're going to do on that one. So you got to overcome it, both of them differently. And then the third option is they say, no, there's nothing, and they may or may not tell you the truth, but you at least ask it. Okay. And as you go through the different interview process, you guys, every company is different. I will tell you that the average amount of interview time is 6 months that I've had and work for these big companies. They take forever. It's death by committee. I start forgetting who all I've interviewed with, at some point, because it's not uncommon that team members or peers are brought in, direct reports, the hiring managers, stakeholders, the hiring managers get involved. Every company's different, but you have to be prepared for all of them. And you have to be prepared to manage them differently. So when you're talking to the head of HR, you need to talk about people. Okay. When you talk to the head of finance, you better talk numbers. When you talk to, you've got to adjust based on who you're sitting across the desk from, and prepare accordingly. How you answer them, match their pace, their tone. When you're dealing with an analytical, get to your point quickly and move on. Do not do more than 3 sentences. And when it's a closed-ended question, answer it in a closed-ended fashion. Okay. Move on, because they're very impatient people on there. So know their background, know their style, and then adjust accordingly. Any questions on the interviewer? Okay. Right. An interview is 90% prep, 10% execution. And so often people fail to prep for an interview, and it's a kiss of death. You need to research that company and know that company better than they know themselves. You need to research that person that you're interviewing with, any shared connections, any articles that they've been quoted in, any speaking engagements they've had, anything they've done. Let's face it, between LinkedIn and Google, there's very little that you can't find. All right. Because what you want to do is weave in that research into the way you answer your questions and the way that you ask questions of them to say, I've done my homework on you. And you need to prepare questions for them. So often people fail at that. They don't ask any questions. And to me, it's a kiss of death, because I weight a candidate 50% on how they answer my questions and 50% on the questions they ask of me. If they're not interviewing me, then it's a job and not a career. If they're not interviewing with me, that tells me that they don't prepare for meetings. They fly by the seat of the pants. If they don't interview me, then that shows me there's no real depth and interest here, you know, and candidly, they're too cavalier on it. So you need to know, is this the right job, the right boss, the right company for you? And if you aren't interviewing them, you're not going to know, and you're going to make mistakes. So you need to prepare questions. You can Google questions to ask in an interview. There's wonderful ones out there, and I have a list of ones that, you know, I certainly share all the time, but, and they need to be relevant. And I always say, don't ask me a question that Google could have already answered for you. How many employees do you have? Well, I don't have one additional one, because you're not going to be joining the team, because the Google could tell you that. You know, it's, you know, don't. It shows that you're lazy. Why are you asking me something that, you know, is this? And you don't go, when you're interviewing with a top executive, the boss's boss, you don't say, so what's the hiring decision date? You don't ask an executive that. So what's the process? Do you know when they're going to make their decision? It needs to be relevant. You need to be up in the clouds when you're talking to the boss's boss. You know, what's your long-term vision? What's your biggest barrier to success? You know, all these things, and lay it into anything that you've read about it, you know, on there. The other thing is, you do need to be yourself. You know, so often we forget that in the context of the interview itself, and as you're preparing for it, is that, you know, but do match the pace of the person that you're interviewing with. If they talk fast, don't talk slow. You'll drive them crazy. If they talk slow, don't talk fast. You know, pace it. They actually teach you in customer service training to, the louder somebody's yelling at you, the softer you should talk, because they'll start coming down, you know, on their tone. So match it, you know, and practice on the video. So much of the video today, no matter how much Zoom fatigue we're in now, you need to practice it, because there's all these different technology platforms out there, and get it going there on the days before, make sure it connects, test it with a friend, you know, do all these things. You want to make sure that all the things visually are there, you know, on there. There's no distractions that on there. I was helping somebody with a mock interview, and the bookshelf behind him was papers falling everywhere, and this, and it was, I said, you've got to organize that before that interview. I said, it makes you look like you're sloppy, and it's this, it's all, you know, in my visual. And then there was a laundry basket there too. I'm like, that better be gone. And I do encourage mock interviews, because we don't interview for a living. It's something that we're not as knowledgeable at or as comfortable at. So get somebody that you respect to interview you. I was interviewing for a very important role that I wanted in my career. And I called 3 CEOs that I knew, that I respected, and I had them do mock interviews for me. And it was intimidating as heck, but I needed it. And they all were good. They pointed out what I did well and what I needed to work on. So if you're serious about it, if you really want that job, then go into some mock interviews. Because when was the last time you interviewed? How often do you interview? Don't run in there by the seat of your pants if you want it. You need to practice, just like anything else that's good. Okay. And I always say, in preparing for the interview, you want to think about, what are 3 things I want to make sure I cover in the interview? 3 things that differentiate me. 3 things that I think will be important that came up in my prep work that I want to cover. So I always have my 3. What are the 3 things I want to make sure I weave in an answer, in a question, and that focuses on differentiating me? How am I different from the other probably 20 candidates they're going to be interviewing? How am I different? Any questions on the prep?
I can comment and add some things. This is really good tips, Maria. Thank you. And I totally agree with the mock interviews. And I don't know if actually this audience is looking or considering, there are actually groups on the LinkedIn, networking groups. I was part of one last year that hold mock interviews, and there's like, people are rotating, but there was about like, we have anywhere between 10 to 15 people, and we have actually most commonly asked questions. For example, during the meeting, we meet once a week for 1 hour, and then we would take turns, ask unexpected questions to each other, and we all had to be on a video, and we would be put on the spot, and then we judge. So there is a lot of good sources out there on the LinkedIn. So if anyone is interested, I can also do some introductions. Just feel free to reach out. Another one is also like when the preparations, it's like research that person. I might have not hear when you said it, Maria, but find that there's always, you will find a path that you knew somebody or they know somebody, you have the same connection on the LinkedIn. And so before the interview, reach out to the common connection and ask, do you know this person personally or not? In one of my last interviews that I was interviewing, one of my previous colleagues was linked to the CPO of the company. And I reached to my colleague and I asked, so do you know this lady personally? Because she used to work at Ford as well. She said, yes, that was my boss. So yeah, that was a great connection, you know, when I talked to her, and just to kind of an icebreaker also. And then the third one was like situation, like be prepared to give some examples and use the STAR technique. And that one definitely helped have some examples in your pocket, and you can basically, some like for the common questions, job relevant, and it really becomes helpful because sometimes you cannot think of the story so quickly, right? And when you organize your thoughts in the STAR format, like situation, task, action, result, it really helps people follow your story. So you know, the interviewer doesn't just sit there and say, huh, what did you say? What does that mean? So just a few additional points, but all of these are really good tips.
Those are great points. And you can Google different interview styles. Companies typically will train their team members on certain styles, whether it's STARS, behavioral based, you know, all these different ways. And what I always do is, to your point, is I look at the job description, and here's a list of, you know, experience they want you to have, skills. And then I'll write an example of where I've done that.
Yep.
Okay. Because when you're interviewing, human nature is you're going to get nervous. You're going to forget things. You know, it's just human nature. So I always have that list next to my computer so that it can remind me. And I just write one word next to it, so it'll jog my memory of that. But what you want to make sure that you do too is when you're doing multiple interviews, you don't want to give the same examples. Okay, so you don't want to be seen, and only use examples that are in your resume, because then you come across as a one-hit wonder. So try to give examples that are not in your resume, because it shows greater depth of who you are, and shift them up. So I'll keep a chart of who I said what to, because I am a little bit of my mother's daughter and I forget who I said what to. So I'm going to tell one person 10 times and one person not at all. So just kind of say, okay, I use that example. I use my Amex example on this person. Don't use it again on the next person, you know, because they do compare and contrast notes.
Yes, for sure.
They do. Okay. Post-interview. So often, I can't tell you, people make a big mistake here, is they don't do a follow-up communication on there. It shows who you are as a professional. And what I always say, that within 24 hours of an interview or a networking meeting, you send an email. Okay. An email that outlines, you know, first of all, I said the first paragraph should be, thank you for your time. So appreciate it, you know, on there. And the next should be bullet points of how you're different, how you're going to help them, you know, travel industry expert, strong negotiator. And then I put a sentence or two beside that. So it explains who they, what that is. And remember, studies show that, let's face it, we're all drowning in email communication. When you do the bullet points, that's what they're going to see. And that's what you want them to see and want them to remember about you, are those 3 bullet points of how you're different. So you start off with, thank you for your time. Here's 3 reasons why I think I'll be effective immediately and long-term. Point 1, 2, 3, bolded and highlighted the subject with a sentence or 2 behind it. And then close with, again, thank you for your time. Let me know if you have any other questions. Okay. Now, what happens is it's not uncommon that this interview process takes a long time. Whatever time they say they're going to have it done, they're not. Nobody does, on there. So, and it's deafening. The time in between is just deafening. Okay. So stay in touch, about every couple weeks, send them a note, how are things going? Send them articles, of what you're seeing out in the industry or about that profession or about them that you think is relevant. Make sure, so often we forget our network. We see that our network helps us get in the door, but we don't focus on our network of help getting us up, keeping us updated, on there. And so it's very important that you circle back with your network, anybody who introduced you there, to say, hey, what are you hearing? Do you know anything? Can you check in with them? Can you reinforce how great I am? But balance out that not too many people send them referral notes. There's a difference between some good referrals and plain insanity. I say 3 great ones are better than 20, coming in all the time. So balance that out with the referrals and stuff and the constant contact. But it's important because that time goes on a long amount of time, and it can feel deafening. It can feel very, very frustrating on there, but stay in touch. Okay. Now the job offer itself. So it's not uncommon. It starts with a verbal and then goes to a written within a 24-hour period. The very first thing you should do is thank them, show appreciation. I'm excited. It's a job I'm seeking, to make sure you have advocacy there, and to say, I'm going to review this and get back to you in the next 24, 48 hours. Don't ever accept it right away. Ever, ever, ever. You need to step back, look at it, and then decide if you want to start negotiating. Okay. Everything is negotiable. Okay. But you have to start off with what's important to you. So at this point in my life, time off is more important to me than a bigger salary. It is. It's just who I am now in my life. So I'm going to weigh more in my negotiation at getting as much time off as I can. Okay. On there. So yeah, but look at everything and negotiate. And as you are going through the interview process, what I always try and find out in the interview process is what is in big companies, they always have a range for this job. In small businesses, they don't even know what a range is. So in the mid to large companies, they have a box. What you have to know is, what is that box, so that you know how far you can go. And everything is tied to that base. The higher the base, the more bonus you get out, the more 401k you get out, the more grants you get, the more everything is threaded to that base. So you have to focus on the base. The other thing is a signing bonus. I don't care if you are unemployed, you can still negotiate a signing bonus. Signing bonuses are meant to, if you're walking away from any future bonus or stock granting or things of that nature, they give you a signing bonus. Okay. But it can be negotiated regardless of that. I would always ask for a signing bonus. I would always negotiate, especially if you're in a profession that requires you to negotiate. This is their first glimpse into your negotiating style. And I always tease and say, you're paying me to be a good negotiator, so get comfortable. We're about to see my skills. Okay. So on there, I remember when I was interviewing, negotiating for the HP job, it's not uncommon that the recruiter in large companies does the negotiating versus the hiring manager. And anyway, I'm sitting there on a Saturday and also my phone rings, it's the chief procurement officer for HP, and he goes, okay, enough of this silly going around. You and I are going to negotiate this deal. Get comfortable. I'm like, I'm comfortable. Are you? So let's go. And he and I stayed on the phone for 2 hours and we worked out my contract. You know, so first of all, the first advice I can give you about negotiating is, so often it's so hard for people to negotiate for themselves, because all of the insecurity starts messing with our head, and all of a sudden the psychology of all this comes all creeping in. Okay. So the very first thing I always ask somebody is, I want you to have an out-of-body experience. I want you to pretend like you're negotiating for someone else and not yourself. And who in life do you love most, that is nearest and dearest to your heart? And start negotiating for them. Act like you are negotiating for that person, and then start going, because when it's too personal, you can't always be as effective because it's just too close to home. But everything's negotiable. Try and find out what the range is, where you are in the range whenever they will divulge it, so you know how far you can hedge it, okay? And what you need to negotiate on it. But go in there and just figure it out, and then counter. And also, when you're countering, like in it, getting a good negotiation, figure out where the give and take is, what you really want to what you'll give at. Okay, but it is a negotiation. It is, and I want you to go there in confidence and learn to balance out getting what you need and what you want in order to feel really good about this new opportunity. Sometimes in internal promotions, there are specific rules, because, you know, companies have to be consistent, otherwise they get in lawsuits. So there's typically a rule of thumb, like of 10% for every level, the blah, 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 blah. Okay, but find out what those rules are, but no, even that is negotiable. Okay, and remember, think of all the other things that are important to you out there that you need. There is an article on there of the new signing bonus is the work from home. Companies are now, who typically did not give that, are giving that. So any questions on the job offers? Okay, I want to stop before I talk about data. I want to stop sharing for a minute and just, I've gone through a lot. I will say this, that it is a really good time to be looking. Okay. That the US job market saw more in, 47 states showed growth in employment opportunities last month. Also, there's a thing called the Great Resignation occurring. And the Great Resignation is there's a significant amount of people that are resigning from their roles because COVID taught us what real work-life balance was, what it really, really was. So people are resigning from companies in record numbers. Record numbers. I was talking to an executive the other day at MasterCard, and he says on his direct team, every week somebody's resigning. And MasterCard's a great place to work. And he goes, and we're struggling to keep people. It's a phenomenon. They're writing all about this in all the different trade publications of Wall Street, et cetera. So it's a good time to be looking, from the Great Resignation to everything else occurring in the marketplace. But you've got to be strategic and thoughtful in whether it's internally or externally that you're looking. These same rules apply. Networking applies internally to your own company as it does externally. It's not different. The only difference is they're just easier to find out there. So anyway, I want to stop for a moment. And because I know we're, only have a few more minutes left, 10 minutes left, to stop and see if there's any questions holistically.
Any questions, thoughts?
All right, well, let's talk about data. And I'm going to go off camera for 2 seconds, Mike, because my dog wants to go out. So I won't make you sick while walking. Okay, so data. Okay, so as Kim knows, I work for a data aggregation company. Okay, sorry about this. And so I thought I could take a few minutes to talk about all things data on there. So what we do at PredictX is we aggregate travel data from every source imaginable. Our customers are Google, Deloitte, Pfizer's of the world. So the more complicated they are, the better we are to service them. So in the context of that, we aggregate it from, we can take trip PAM data to directly from all suppliers, all types, and we aggregate it, normalize it, clean it, and give them a sexy reporting platform to put it on. And we even have a patent on a product called The Story, where it takes all the data that we have and it writes like an annual report on its own, literally on there. So, you know, I thought we could, because I'm a data expert, see if you guys had any questions on data. What was the one thing you've always wanted to know about data? I thought, well, I was here to see if there was anything from that I can answer for you guys as well.
Dina, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you can elaborate a little bit on the tool about the data that you just mentioned at your company, like pulling data from what sources and what is it used for, who uses it in the company? And
it's a good question. And guys, I don't want this to be a commercial, so please, you know, it was just an expertise. You know, on there is the company I work for is PredictX, and we're one of several companies who aggregate travel data. So an example is we get travel agency data, we get credit card data, we get expense data, we get data directly from Marriott. You know, so we get all the data in. And so what we do is then we match it all up and we clean it up. And then we have a very sophisticated reporting platform that they can run any report that they need. Like if they're doing an airline sourcing project, they can do it, or, you know, supplier management reporting needs, any need that they have for reporting, we do that for them. Did that answer your question?
yes.
I love data.
So even if the company is using like a different platform, so you can pull the data from different variety of the platforms,
Yes.
For example, Concord Travel,
Oh yeah,
and all that, and consolidate into one place.
Yeah, we consolidate into one because, as you know, every data source, I compare a data source to men. They're not one of them is perfect. So so what we do is we bring them all in, and then we make it perfect in the fact that it gives you the whole view, gives you the entire trip view, that it won't in its siloed perspective. And you can use as many TMCs as you want, or one. You can use as many credit cards as you want, or one. We even get feeds from the GDS. It's up to you. But it puts it all together with one thing. So you know exactly what happened to your Hilton reservation all the way through, from the time you booked it to the time that you expensed it and everything in between. So it gives you a more accurate, holistic view of your travel spend.
So Maria, to another question as far as data is concerned, what are you seeing from the travel industry now in this pandemic era that we continually are in? What's one of the most urgent, or one of the most sought after pieces of information or data that you're seeing?
Great question. Okay, so let's break it apart. Kind of what am I seeing, first of all? So one of the things I'm seeing is, you know, I call it the COVID effect. If you look at what happened in the beginning, data was about crisis management. The crisis management was, where had they been, where are they now, and where are they going? That was the crisis management. So data was all about tracking that. Okay, so part of that, you know, was, again, we had to figure out where everybody was, where they were going, all that. The next phase was asset management. So asset management was, okay, I have all these canceled tickets and canceled meetings. How do I manage that asset? Because it's an asset. So data helps you manage that asset. So how do I mitigate the risk through asset management? And the third phase is recovery management. And everybody's recovering very differently. It's based on industry, size of company, as to the recovery of it and what that looks like. So part of what we're looking in the recovery phase of this, until we get to whatever the new normal will be, is there are behavioral changes occurring. There are travel pattern changes occurring. There are all these things that are occurring. So kind of let's departmentalize them. It's behavioral changing first because so much of quarantine was required when they traveled, and now not as much quarantine, but there's still some. So travel patterns changed because of that. The length of stays increased substantially because they would have to quarantine for a couple of weeks, and both ends of the deal, this is this. So the buying behavior shifted for that. Now what also is happening behind buying behavior is shifting because they're not buying as far in advance, because sometimes they don't know if that trip's really going to happen, you know, like it used to. And because the rules change so quickly on where they're traveling to, that they're not booking as far in advance. Okay. And then the use of preferred suppliers has dropped. And I think that's the result of the fact that the needs have changed. You know, they're looking more at long-term stay type properties, you know, because the length of stay is increasing. They're combining trips more than ever historically have. Travel patterns are huge that are occurring. So as a result of the pandemic, the good and bad is many companies have said, look, just work from home. We're fine. You've proven your ability to do this. You have myth busted that for us. A lot of companies, not all, some are still in the dark ages. So people are moving. They're going to go live now where they want to live, not where they have to live. Okay. So there are big movements there. And I'm certainly, everybody has seen this in Atlanta to housing prices. There's some, you know, I started thinking, are we in New York City? And the housing prices. So travel patterns are changing. So that has a big impact, and you've got to monitor that in data because it has an impact to your T&E. Because all of a sudden, somebody who would typically commute to an office is now going to travel to an office. So everybody's changing where they're going to. And not only that, but everybody who wants a supplier that wants to meet with that person used to go to New York City. Now that person is in Florida. Okay. So travel pattern changes. Travel pattern changes have always been there because a company will buy a company, sell a company. They will gain a customer, lose a customer. So travel patterns have always existed, but not to this extent. It's far more than it ever historically have been. So as you look at the data, and I can go on, and Kim, I think you got the hook on Maria. I asked you a simple question. There are lots occurring in the data and things you have to look at. So why is that important? It's important because contracts are pretty much null and void. What existed doesn't count anymore. You know this, demand's different and unpredictable. Supply is different and unpredictable in some cases, depending on your category on there. So data becomes very, very, very important on there. As a matter of fact, I will say this, the saving grace at Predictus is we're SaaS agreements. There is nothing transactional about what we do with our customers at all. So when COVID hit, we were not as impacted because we're SaaS. And so in addition to that, what companies are seeing is that data is more important than ever before. So our sales funnel didn't shrink up, which we were fearful that it would. On the opposite, we had L'Oreal, Amgen, and Google all sign with us this year. So the opposite, companies are seeing the value of accurate data and the investment in it, but it's not easy. But there's so many things occurring on the data side that to look for and monitor. The biggest thing certainly being the behavioral aspect of it, the contractual impact, the inflationary, deflationary is very, very important because if you look at certain categories, let's take the ground transportation side, huge increases in cost there, huge inflationary for, because of a stupid chip in a car, along with, so the cost of automobiles, but in addition to the labor shortages, on there. So, category by category, all inflationary, deflationary things are very important to look for in the data.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, we're almost out of time, but a question did come in, Maria, that I want to make sure that we pose to you, and it actually has to do with the virtual working remote. So I'm going to just get straight to the question. It says, have you seen more and more employers making the permanent decision of keeping their employees working from home in a permanent basis, that is?
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of what's occurring out there. I see the majority are doing it, but not all. I think some are still in the dark ages. I worked from home most of my career. BCD Travel was the only time I was in the office. After that, I worked from home. All the jobs I've had, people have always asked me, how'd you convince companies to do that? And I said, I just made it part of the deal, on there. And I think I'll use IHG, somebody in our home turf. If you guys remember, ISG has always historically been, they had to come in that office, that beautiful ivory tower over the perimeter, that beautiful building. And they have gone from 33 floors to 10 floors. They are subletting all the rest, and it's now entirely work from home, and it's a hoteling concept in their office now. But they eliminated 2/3 of that office. Okay. And what you're seeing is smart companies are going that direction. They absolutely are going that direction. Now, it varies. I think it varies by industry, size of company, and company culture as to who's doing what. And I've seen a mixed bag. There are companies that are requiring people 100% now to come back, and they're having to COVID test every couple of days or having to show this. It is such a complicated issue because it's not just about a work from home. It's how do you ensure the safety of your employees in an office? How do you do that? If you think they really, really have to be there, then how do you do that? But there are some great examples. I mean, if you look at the consulting industry, one of the biggest travelers, population of the traveling percentage, they've convinced their customers that the consultants can be as effective at home. And all the big consulting companies have had banner years, their best years in history. Well, everybody was at home. And this is an industry that the consultants were there in that office, 4 days a week on there, and they're shifting because their customers believed it. They said, you're right, we didn't miss a beat. And matter of fact, they said, instead of spending that money on T&E, you can have more consulting engagements. And that's what they did. Mm-hmm. So all these things are occurring. So look, in my opinion, I think most industries and most professions, you can work from home. Not everything. I mean, I can't do an operation from home. But most can. So I think that, and I think based on the great resignation of what's occurring here, those that were not changing are going to have to rethink it even again, because the great resignation is a real deal. It's out there, Google it, it's happening, and they don't expect it to stop. And what's driving part of it is those that are being forced to go back to an office.
Good points all the way around. Well, with that, Maria, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the entire Georgia chapter of GBTA for yet another very enlightening and great presentation. Thank you. You're always welcome within our team, and we're glad that you're part of us. I will just a comment before I turn it back over to Dwight to wrap things up. But just so everyone knows, and I first of all, let me say welcome. I know we have some new guests that that are new to our chapter joining us today. So welcome. We hope you'll come back, and we hope you'll become a member and take advantage of everything that this dynamic membership has to offer. Also, to let everyone know, this has been recorded, and we will have it on our YouTube channel. And we'll have the presentation posted on our website as well. And Maria, if I could ask you one thing one of the many things you mentioned during the presentation is that you would give some links to the formatting for online application process. So if you'll send that over to me, we'll get those posted and give you the helpful hints for that.
Yeah, and it's a company called JobScan. But there are several out there that do that. And it's for a small fee, and it'll match up the job description to your resume.
Perfect.
Oh, the other thing I
Thank
forgot
you.
to mention was, and Kim, you posted, is our career search group. So we meet, if you know anybody who's in the midst of a career search, we meet every single Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and we have a go-to meeting. We also have our own group on LinkedIn, the CTME Search Party, and we post jobs there. We just help each other, whatever somebody needs. But we're constantly posting job opportunities. We've got systems set up to search everything under the sun. So we share them there, and just general chatter about where you may need help. So the calls and and I'll send that to Kim if anybody's interested, or if you know somebody. The best thing I can tell you, if you know somebody who's been displaced, be the first phone call to them to help.
Great advice. That's fantastic. So we'll definitely get the link posted and everything. So thank you. And Dwight, back to you.
Thank you, Kim. And Maria, thank you. This was amazing. Such important, relevant information, and a little comical too. So I got a chuckle or two today. So that was awesome. Thank you for that.
I know I look like a nun, but I tell people, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind all that our next meeting is September 30th, and we're going to have Suzanne Neufund with GBTA on for our Coffee with Suzanne. I think that's a morning presentation. And remember to fill out your after your post-meeting survey, get that out correct. And then always, I want to remind you to support our social media platforms on Facebook and LinkedIn. Thank you to all that took the time to join us today. I appreciate your attendance and participation, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.